Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, and today I want to talk to you about the 2024 Senate elections and what I like to call the lackluster Republican curse that has plagued the Republican Party for the past two election cycles, that has caused them to lose very much winnable races, or races that would otherwise be significantly more conservative, more Republican-leaning than they actually end up being because of this problem. A nomination problem that stems directly from the base and is influenced largely by major political actors, people like President Donald Trump, members of the Trump family, members of the Republican constituency within the state that are choosing candidates solely based on ideology and far away from the issue of electability in a general election. And so on your screen right now is the 2024 Senate map. And here I would like to take you on a journey going through all of the states where Republicans have put forth far from the best candidates that they could have put forth in the 2024 Senate elections, races that should otherwise be more competitive, that could be very winnable had Republicans gone a different direction earlier on in the campaign season, based on where we are now and how it probably won't be moving that way for quite some time. So with our remaining time here, I want to also take a moment to acknowledge that the 2024 Senate elections are ones that from the very beginning have been ultimately favored towards the Republican Party. We have rarely ever seen a Republican Party advantage so strong on a Senate map here, and the fact that it is even under consideration in the first place should speak to the level of failure that the Republican Party on the Senate side has seen when it comes down to the nomination process. Republicans are most supposed to choose the best and the brightest when it comes down to who they nominate, because quite frankly, Democrats have. They've ensured that almost all of their competitive incumbents, meaning people that are in competitive races, have decided to run for re-election alongside the fact that Democrats have fielded very strong candidates from the very beginning. Ruben Gallego in Arizona, Elisa Slotkin in the state of Michigan, the list goes on because Democrats were on top of their game here. They were on their air game. Republicans just simply were not. Rather, should we call it a T game? It was entirely focused on one person and one person alone. Loyalty to President Donald Trump and the way that they treated him in the past. Did they support him in 2016? Did they support him in 2020? Did they support him after the insurrection? Did they support him in years past? All of these things were far more significant factors and far more influential in terms of the predictive outcome of who was going to win a primary, because a lot of that came with loyalist support from the Trump base, sometimes even from Donald Trump himself, and very often you found that they ultimately chose the wrong people. And so I want to start this off alphabetically, looking at the first state, Arizona, where I believe this is probably one of the worst Republican recruits we have seen of this cycle, and probably the best case of exactly what I mean here when I say a lackluster Republican. Somebody who could have been great, a nomination that could have gone to somebody very strong, who could have won this race hands down, or at least would be in a somewhat, or if not significantly stronger position than where Republicans are today. And Arizona is a perfect example of that. So I wanted to kick it off by characterizing Arizona first as a state where I believe Republicans have a very bad place to start off from, and probably not much more movement to move into the winning column. And I say this because if you remember anything about the 2022 midterm elections, it was that we only covered a handful of Senate, House, and gubernatorial races. And one of the most important ones that we talked about probably pretty extensively was the Arizona governor's race, which was a state that was going to face the first true test of a midterm election in a Joe Biden presidency after just flipping to the Democratic Party in 2020 for the first time since 1996. And so Arizona, in this race here, Katie Hobbs ended up defeating a Republican Kari Lake, but not without heavy consideration that the Democrats were just going to lose this race by 4 to 5 points. The polls had predicted that in Arizona, Kari Lake was going to win by 3 to 4 points. It was supposed to be a strong victory, and what we know about Arizona is that in 2020, the polls actually underestimated Donald Trump quite significantly, to a point where Kari Lake, if you applied the 2020 results and the incorrect, polling numbers, Kari Lake would have won this race by anywhere from 6 to 10 points. And so Katie Hobbs ending up winning this race was a huge shock, showed Republicans that the polls can also be wrong on their side of the aisle, and it showed that Democrats have a core base that doesn't always show up and show out in the polls. That matters here. You see, Republicans are in a position where they need to do very well in states like this, where the changing demographic trends and the shifts from 2018 and 2020 are so strong in favor of the Democrats that even in a year where President Biden was so unpopular, Katie Hobbs was able to win. Well, here's Kari Lake, the Republican nominee for governor who ended up losing this race, who went on to deny the results of the election for a year past until she ultimately pivoted and decided that she wanted to run for Senate. Well, here's where she's doing today. Here's how well she's doing, or rather, not doing so well. Kari Lake is down in the most recent poll from CBS News by 13 points across the state. On average, Ruben Gallego, the Democrat here, who is the presumptive Democratic nominee, is ahead by 6.6% on average. And a lot of it is being weighed down by earlier on polls taken at the end of April, where Ruben Gallego and Kari Lake had been less known by the state, and the campaign has started to really branch out. And it has been consistent. 2 points, 3 points, 5 points, 10 points, 13 points. Ruben Gallego's lead is increasing, and I am telling you this because I need you to know. Kari Lake was the wrong person for this state. Because when you pop over to the presidential, it is the same group here that is choosing Trump by 4, that is choosing Ruben Gallego by 7. This is an 11-point delta. This is not something that can be overcome by Republicans, by Kari Lake, and it all has to do with candidate quality. It's not that Ruben Gallego is somehow, this person who is coming into this with such phenomenal support. He has strong support, but he's by no means an unbeatable Democrat. And yet somehow Kari Lake has turned him into exactly that. And so I think they genuinely need to realize that an association with Donald Trump should not be the only factor in determining who should be the next U.S. Senator from a state on the Republican side. Because very often, we've seen this, that is what loses you elections. The next state is a state that I just flashed to you very briefly, but it is the state of Ohio, where Bernie Moreno has ended up as the Republican nominee for Senate here. Now, here's what should tip you off about why this was a bad choice. Democrats and Sherrod Brown and those aligned with him backed Bernie Moreno in the Republican primary. And you might be thinking, okay, LTE, why are we at this point? Why would Democrats in any scenario back a Republican in a primary? Well, they only do it if they know that that Republican is the easiest one to beat. And just like, just exactly as Democrats anticipated, it was the backing of the money that made Bernie Moreno more appealing to conservatives. I mean, they brandished him as a MAGA patriot, Trump conservative. That was things that they wanted to be broadcast to Republican channels to make him more appealing to conservatives. And it worked. Donald Trump endorsed him, many major actors across the state endorsed him, and ultimately, he ended up winning the nomination. Well, guess what? What do we know about Ohio? Well, I can tell you this. On the presidential race, it's not even in the list of battleground states. And there's a reason for that. When you take a look at the electoral map here in Ohio, Donald Trump leads Joe Biden by an average of 10 points. So you might be thinking, okay, what does it look like on the Senate level? Maybe there's a 5-point delta. Bernie Moreno's ahead by 5, when, okay, Trump's ahead by 10. Maybe it should be closer. Maybe it's closer, but maybe it should be, larger for the GOP, but it's ultimately still a Republican victory. That's just simply not the case. There is a 15-point delta between Sherrod Brown and Donald Trump in terms of overall net lead. Sherrod Brown leads Bernie Moreno by a margin here of by 5 points, a 15-point swing. That is something that I just genuinely cannot wrap my head around, but it is the way that Ohio is expected to vote. Ohio is a state that has very much leaned more towards the right in the past 2 election cycles, but does not push away from electing Sherrod Brown when it's against a candidate like Bernie Moreno. Bernie Moreno has a lot of baggage, and Democrats knew that, and so they backed him, and so did Republicans. It played right into their hand, and you can see it in the data we're looking at right now. Ohio was the wrong decision here for Republicans to choose Bernie Moreno in this state. So here we are. Arizona, Ohio. First of all, I want to say that in a Senate map like this one, where every single state matters, Republicans really should be doing so much better than they actually are. To put things into perspective, if we applied the 2020 presidential electoral map, Republicans would be ahead 52-48, which means they are underperforming the 2020 electoral map when Donald Trump lost. And here's what we're expecting for the 2024 electoral map: Donald Trump to do tremendously better. Win back Georgia, win back Wisconsin, become the first Republican to win Nevada since George W. Bush. This would be, very much a significant overperformance from 2020. And yet they underperform in the Senate races because the candidates have gotten worse. Arizona and Ohio are perfect examples of that. But it extends not only to those states. It also has happened somehow in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, a lackluster Republican who ran for Senate in 2022, faced carpetbagging allegations, couldn't make it through a primary because he was unlikable by the constituency. For the constituency, the Republicans there did not want him. In Wisconsin, Eric Hovde is a Republican transplant from California who has now moved to the state of Wisconsin and has faced a lot of pressure, a lot of attacks, and arguably a lot more scandals than he should be able to have as someone who is supposedly hand-chosen for the seat. The problem here, too, lies in the fact that there's something going wrong at the top for the Republican Party. Because all four of these people have practically been encouraged, backed, and told to run. These are campaigns that are being extended and are extensions of the Donald Trump for President campaign. These are people that were told, Dave McCormick, move from Connecticut to Pennsylvania, run. Eric Hovde, move from California to Wisconsin, run. Bernie Moreno, who had no interest in politics, make the decision to run in 22, 24, whatever it might be. End up in the Senate because you are going to be a loyalist for Donald Trump. But the problem is, these candidates just aren't the best type of people. These people are not the right type of candidate. They have baggage. They have problems the Republican Party should have and probably did know about. Carrie Lake, we knew about. Don't know why the endorsement came in so early on, and the Senate Republican wing just cleared the field for her. Bernie Moreno, there was Frank LaRose. There were other people, Matt Dolan. There were better candidates. It's frustrating when it comes from my point of view. I, frankly, am not personally invested in the success here, regardless. This is supposed to be something that is purely analytical, but I can't help but tell you that it is absolutely frustrating when you know a race could have gone a different way, regardless of how you feel it might be. And it's just something that could be really summed up to be a stupid mistake on the side of national GOP leadership that results in losses. It's not that I'm just saying, I'm really not trying to come from this from a partisan lens. I want you to just understand it is frustrating when this has happened time and time again. And it seems as if we go through these regurgitated talking points from 22 and even 2020 where it's like, hey, someone should be picking up on this. And ultimately they're not. Anyways, I guess if you're a Democrat watching this, you're probably happy about that because it means that this is where you find really a lot of fault on the Republican side. And it doesn't just end here. When you take a look at our Senate map, you might be wondering, why is Montana tilt red? Sure, John Tester is strong, but arguably, his opponent isn't that phenomenal. I think what you find is that Democrats have lucked out through a combination of factors in recent elections. When I look back at 2022, there were two things here that made the Senate flip more in favor of the Democratic Party. On one end, Republicans nominated the wrong people. On the other hand, Democrats nominated the right people. When there's a mismatch, it doesn't always win you an election. For instance, in Wisconsin, as much as Mandela Barnes was, in fact, a strong enough candidate that he got within a point of Wisconsin, this race might have gone differently had Democrats nominated somebody else. Ron Johnson was a bad GOP nominee. Mandela Barnes wasn't a bad Democratic nominee. He just wasn't a recruit that's the same level as Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. He wasn't the same as somebody like Mark Kelly, who was recruited back in 2020. And even when you take a look, too, when it comes down to a lot of these races, the good news for Democrats is that, when they're running in a race with a Democratic incumbent, that almost always is a strong candidate, and they already check that box. So now it's just on the onus of the Republican Party to nominate somebody bad. The unfortunate reality is that while Mandela Barnes wasn't this candidate who was unbeatable, because evidently he lost, he certainly was someone who could have won if he was an incumbent. Had Mandela Barnes already been the senator there, there's no shot Ron Johnson would have beaten him. But it is the fact that he came in as an outsider and came in as someone who, wasn't in the U.S. Senate. Sure, he was lieutenant governor, but you're not a senator. And I think that's really where you find, specifically not only in Wisconsin, but in other states, like in Ohio, where Tim Ryan, who very much in his congressional district displayed very similar tendencies, and sure, weaker than Sherrod Brown, but still, as an incumbent, I think could have put up so much more of a fight than someone who ended up losing by roughly 6 points. Point here, Democrats have the benefit of having nominees in these races that are strong because they are the incumbents. And Montana is another state here where I think you have a combination of factors which reduces the state down to being a very close and competitive race. That is why Montana is there. And so I think this is where you see Democrats really starting to shine through. Despite this map here, every state that is on your screen right now with lackluster Republicans went to Trump in 2016. 2 of them went to Trump in 2020. Republicans, if Trump wins, Republicans need just 1 seat to flip Senate control. And they already got that with West Virginia. So at baseline, everything else stays the same. Republicans should have Senate control, but they need it secured. Because should Joe Biden win re-election, they need more than that. And so they need just one state. But it becomes that much more difficult when almost every state they would turn to, Pennsylvania, no. Ohio, no. Wisconsin, no. Arizona, no. Montana, maybe. Because of the nominees they have chosen, they have dug their own graves. Races that Republicans are likely to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in, all really summed up to being failures on their end. Because of nominees that they chose, they backed, they nominated, and they will watch it play out through November, and they're going to look back on this potentially shocked. How did we lose? Even if Trump wins, how did we lose these Senate races? And it's the same conversation they had in 2022, before somehow this cognitive dissonance moved them away from realizing what everyone else was telling them, that candidate quality matters, who you choose matters, and electability should be the most important thing when you look at who should become the Republican nominee, because Democrats clearly are doing something right. They survived an air quotes, you can't see me doing it, but I'm doing air quotes, red wave in 2022 by employing that strategy. They won the 2020 presidential election by employing that strategy. Time will tell about 2024. But looking at the map here and looking at the ratings map, Republicans might be winning the majority right now, but it is far too close to comfort in a map that should be otherwise a Republican blowout. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.